Hello, algorithm. Good morning, algorithm, and the rest of the audience. Good afternoon to students, to teachers, heading Health Dynamic School. My name is Félix Rodríguez, and my commitment today is to read 2 pages for each participant of my class, of my session. Right now, we have Levi Guadarrama, we have Cristina Bielmas, and we have Lucero Lopez. God help me. Thank you. Lo que decía es que tengo el compromiso de leer 2 páginas por cada alumno que esté presente y para todos en casa. Sí, sí, lea usted, usted lo necesita. Dates from 1985, page 23. Four robots and monsters begin to dominate the scene. The role of the human figures, by contrast, is submissive and subordinate. Even an angel is caught in the claws of devilish creatures, and the saving grace of the UFO can only penetrate with difficulty. With this form of naive genius, Keith Haring disseminated simple truths that needed no precise explanation. The simple and emblematic matchstick man got through to a public numbered in millions. The mere attention of the passers-by and the many conversations with them about his work gave Haring a real link to the external world in response to people's questions. He had buttons made with his tags, which he distributed free of charge to the curious public. Between parentheses, page 32, top. Vamos a dejar nuestras mochilas al lado solo por si hay un evento sísmico. The subway drawings were conceived as temporary, which at the latest would be passed over at the start of the next advertising campaign. However, Keith Haring's increasing fame triggered a veritable boom for his art, so that many of the drawings were removed and marked by passers-by not long after they were executed. Les puedo asegurar de que no estoy solo haciendo synchronicity, sino que es lectura en vivo. Greetings if you're listening at home or at work. Shortly after covering the New York subway network with his first drawings, Haring made his first profits from sales of his pictures. As time went on, he realized that he could not act as his own dealer. Increasingly frequent visits from interested collectors were robbing him of valuable time, which he could not then use for his art. The search for a suitable gallery seemed inevitable, and so it was that in 1982, Tony Shafari became his New York dealer, the gallery owner whose assistant he had earned a few dollars on the side just 2 years earlier. Together, they planned his first large solo exhibition for October 1982. Haring, who until then had largely concentrated on drawings, now wanted for the first time to show a large format paintings. It was while preparing for this exhibition that he discovered vinyl turpentine as the ideal surface for painting. These industrially produced protective sheets were not only obtained in any size he liked, but were also available in garish colors. With holes punched at regular intervals around the edges, the turpentines were easy to hang and also even easier to transport. On this turpentine, Haring used a special vinyl film. Was the reasons that he initially decided on this surface. Tony and I decided that I would have my first one-man show in his new gallery in October of 1982. ¿Quién es? ¿Quién es? It became a critical event. Now, during this time, I had just been drawing And for the show, I wanted to do some big paintings, which I have resisted doing all along. The reason was that I have an aversion to canvas. I always felt I would be invaded by canvas because canvas seemed to have a certain value before you even touched it. Recuerda, Tristan, que cuando me dicen allá, yo los paso aquí, entonces mejor de aquí. I felt, también que alguien pase conmigo de favor. I felt I would be free the way I was working on paper because paper was unpretentious and totally available and wasn't all that expensive. Also, for me, canvas represented this whole historical thing, and it just psychologically blocked me. For this exhibition, which was accompanied by a catalog for the first time, Keith Haring followed the principle of the works created in situ. Alongside the display of drawings and works on vinyl, he also integrated the walls of the gallery into his all-over concept, covering them with his typical figures and line elements, page 24 and 25. Between the freezing, ¿puedes por favor llamarle a Adrián, Mr. Francisco? Gracias. Freezing of running and dancing figures, crawling babies and drawings of Mickey Mouse and Smurfs. He hung the works on vinyl. Motif-wise, this evolved from the subway drawings, the pictures whose structure was amazingly simple and highly graphic, focus on easily comprehensible themes once more, like to embracing figures surrounded by a halo of rays of the motif of the dancing dog, page 27 top. His paintings were executed following the same procedures of his drawings. First of all, he painted a frame for the picture before using just a few brush strokes of even breadth to sketch the contents, while his subway drawings were oriented to the contrast of black and white. The vinyl turpelines allowed him to work in polychrome. For sure, Adrian, welcome aboard. It's because I don't want to keep you back. Nonetheless, Haring worked with a minimal palette, distinguished solely between outline and field color. Roy Lochestein, Robert Rushberg, Sol Lewitt, Richard Serra, and Francesco Clemente attended the opening of the exhibition, with formally launched Haring's meteoric race to fame. The absurd figure with a hole in its belly, allowing its function as a hook for acrobatic dogs to jump through, it's an allusion to specific events opposite. This motif, which Haring had already employed in his subway drawings, was, according to his own account, his way of coping with the murder of John Lennon in 1980. It had this incredibly sobering effect on the entire city. I woke up next morning with this image in my head of the man with a hole in his stomach. ¡Va a explotar! And I always associated that image with the death of John Lennon. Quite apart from the countless variations of figures, babies and dogs, one constant recurring figure is the three-eyed smiling face, which was to be seen at the exhibition in the form of a painting in enamel on sheet metal. This cartoon-like image with its broad smile and big eyes puts across altogether positive signal to start with, which, however, because of the third unnatural eye, is disturbed in a somewhat creepy fashion. A mural painted by Haring on Houston Street in 1982 evidences the same eerie quality, pages 28-29, between parentheses, for the mural. He used fluorescent paintings, which can be made glow when exposed to ultraviolet light. Haring also used these paintings for a series of sculptures, which were based on three-dimensional objects, mostly reproductions of classical bursts and columns, and which were primed with the fluorescent paint. Haring would then totally cover the painted objects, for example, the head of Michelangelo's David with his signs and abbreviations, page 31. Many of these sculptures were executed in collaboration with the 14-year-old graffiti artist Angel Ortiz, whose tags LA2 and LA Rock caught Haring's eye during a nocturnal stroll through the city. Haring was so taken by the painterly perfection of Ortiz tags that he proposed that the two collaborated in the following years. Haring and LA2 executed many projects together and exhibited the collaborative work. The surfaces they worked on together consisted mostly of a combination of LA2's tag and Haring's line elements and abstract signs. The exhibition was followed by a series of events in rapid succession that led to a steady increase in his popularity. Every 20 minutes for a month, a large format, a spectacular billboard on Times Square in New York showed that 30-second animation of these icons projects is sponsored by the New Jersey Public Art Fund. Left. At the same time, various institutions in Europe were beginning to show an interest on these unusual artists. Long before Haring achieved artistic respectability in America, he was acknowledged and admired on the other side of the Atlantic, not least at the museum level. An invitation by the Dutch Office of Culture resulted in a trip to Rotterdam, followed by a visit to the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam. In the fall of that year, Haring was represented at the 7th Documenta exhibition of contemporary art, held in the German cities of Kassel by two large formats work in vinyl turbulence. In just a short time, his art had taken him to the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, Great Britain, Japan, and Italy. On all his journeys, he left his mark on the cityscape in typically public fashion. His name and his art became well known in a very short time. Inquiries and offers came flooding in from all over the world, and Haring found, estas fueron las dos páginas que yo dedico amablemente, con humildad, ¿a quién llegó primero a mi clase? ¿Levi? Levi. Esas fueron las dos páginas para Levi. Thank you. Himself incapable of coping with the consequent organizational problems on his own, transferring many of these responsibilities to Julia Gruen, whom he employed as his assistant. His private life was not uneventful either. At least after numerous unsuccessful relationships, Haring met Joan Dubois, an African-American DJ who became his long-term partner and support. In the spring of 1984, Haring staged his first Party of Light to mark his birthday. Party of Light. Estás cerca de ya estar ready. Thank you. A decision motivated by his desire to allow his friends to share in his steadily growing success. Si gustas, puedes pasar, Francisco. For this purpose, he hired the entire Paradise Garage, commissioned his friend, the singer Madonna, to provide the musical entertainment and design special t-shirts which were distributed among those present. His biographer describes a heavy party with 3,000 guests. Art, commerce, and children. We have a new chapter. Tenemos un nuevo capítulo. My bad. Authenticity is an essential feature of Haring's works. In spite of her striking, easy-to-read imaginary, his pictures convey a particular feeling for life expressing sensations whose validity ranges from the personal to general. The contrived use of the monochrome ground, key rapid and fluent course of a line, constant breadth, and a simple repertoire of forms designed to ensure instant recognizability are the characteristic features of works with an immediate effect. For this reason, his images achieved an icon status. The name Keith Haring was and continues to be primarily associated with the graphic paintings style in which areas of luminous color are outlined in thick black contours. These lines are not just drawn from reasons of purely formal demarcation, but enjoy an aesthetic status on their own. Aesthetic. Pasa, por favor, porque si no me distraigo para que me entregues el libro. Thank you. Más lento. The artist preferred palette. The artist's preferred palette comprises the colors red, blue, yellow, and green, applied unmixed and in large patches. They create a shrill signal effect with no highlights or shading whatsoever. As far as motifs are concerned, Keith Haring que estés muy bien, Bren, had recourse primarily to those visual sources for which he himself was surrounded. From the archive of his personal experiences, he drew the models of his art. Goodbye, Sebastián, have a good one. A ver si tú sabes qué le pasó a Carlos. While at the same time continually varying the composition of his works. The picture is dominated sometimes by a single figure, sometimes by many things going on at once. What we have are narratives of moods, but often no specific messages is offered. Alongside the pure fantasy motifs, there are works that do address particular themes. The painting, untitled, dating from 1983, between parentheses, page 47 top, is an homage to their family. The yellow line in red shading represents the outlines of two pregnant women who, dancing, extend a hand to each other, flanked by a stylish spermatozoa. Spermatozoa. My bad. Spermatozoa. Between them, somewhat in the background, is a male figure who is likewise stretching his arm upward. In the center, lording it over the entire scene, is the crawling baby within a radiant halo. In contrast to Haring's previous works, the contour is additionally marked by short strokes, and the intermediate spaces are entirely filled with dashes and action lines. Only in the bulging abdomens of the women can this otherwise interpretational dashes be interpreted as follows. And like iconography. It is true, hello. It is true that in these works, Haring intentionally has recourse to known precursors from the works of fairy tales and animated cartoons. But to call him a children's artist on the account would be. Eso fue para la segunda persona que llegó a mi clase. Fue. Wrong. The parallels with Walt Disney figures are undeniable, but their reading is geared to an alienated form that cannot always become child-friendly by any means. Haring exploits his instant recognizability in order to confuse the viewer, similar as it's to the third eye smiling face. Page 4. The expressions on the face of the wolf comes across at first sight as friendly, and the impression conveyed by the big rolling eyes, right? However, the animal's benevolent gaze distracts from its threatening jaws and teeth. In combination with the lascivious red tongue, the primary pictorial statement is now transformed into its opposite. ¿Están listos? Va a salir del horno. Y se va. Y ahí están. ¿Les parece? In the center of another work is the well-known figure of Pinocchio. easily identified by the long nose and the articulated joints, opposite. Haring interpreted the notorious liar as a phallic figure who joyfully displays his elongated sex and has little in common with the character on which he is based. Elsewhere, Haring uses the four crazy animal tormenting figure of Cruella de Vil, page 39, page 38 between parentheses, from Walt Disney's story of the 101 Dalmatians. The face of the woman depicted in profile resembles a mask. In addition, wrinkles and conspicuous veins disfigure the original immaculated image of the sophisticated woman. Alongside Walt Disney and Company, the everyday lives of Haring generation were marked by such topics as nuclear power station and space technology. One diary entry shows that the artist was aware of his contradictory situation. Born 1958, the first generation of the space age born into a world of television technology and instant gratification, a child of the atomic age. Growing up in America during the 60s with news about the war from live issues about Vietnam. Watch riots on televisions in warm living room, more or less securing the America of the white middle class. Haring was a vehement opponent of nuclear power. He took part in public demonstrations and designed posters with anti-nuclear slogans, which he distributed free of charge at the events. One painting composed by the artist in his characteristic sign language, page 41, tells of the terrors of the atomic age. In white paint on black sheet, it depicts the crawling baby in the center of a nuclear scenario, thus surrendering the symbol of life annihilation. Thick red crosses, utilized as negative markings, utilized as negative markings, are scattered over the world's surface. The minimalist technique emphasizes the urgency of the message. No less urgent and no less horrific are the paintings pointing to the negative effects of technological progress. Haring created grotesque scenarios in which greedy monsters and horned robots play a dominant role. Pages 39 and 40. Human beings, by contrast, are represented as small subordinate entities, transformed into headless and thus livable creatures. Elsewhere, the dominance of technology is depicted as millipied with a computer in place of a head, page 34. Technology has come to replace man as a thinking being. Haring was perfectly well aware that his pictures were in part absurd. The symbols explain themselves and are altogether simple, but their combinations, the way in which they go together or exclude each other, is sometimes contradictory. There is no clear path from A to B, just as hardly anything ever has the same meaning. Many different thoughts exist at the same time, as in a dream. One thing makes sense, another thing doesn't, and yet both together depict reality. The thematic orientation of his works is not restricted just to general or social cultural aspects, but also documents entirely personal interests such as dance. Dance and music were for Keith Haring essential components of his creativity. While he worked, he would listen to hip hop music played at full energy rate. A lo que llaman libertad. Ah, ¿en serio?
Sí, lo amo.
Gracias, yo amo.
Fútbol.
Pero si te hubieras quedado, es la mitad nada más de lo que dijo. Ah, ready. Volume in his studio. In addition, he was himself a passionate dancer. Visit to his favorite club, the Paradise Garage, were part of his weekend ritual. Whenever possible, Haring arranged his foreign trip so that he could be back in New York in time for Saturday night. The many dance scenes in his artistic output bear witness to this passion. His pictures reflect the spirit of hip hop, breakdance, and electric boogie. A prime example is the 1983 picture entitled in between parentheses, opposite. The figure's ecstatic movement results from the logical consistent transfer of electric boogie to the medium of painting. His figure, otherwise sketched with gracefully curved lines, is were composed throughout of zigzag strokes. The usual action lines come across as flashes of lightning, which emphasize the theme of electricity once more. Captured under rhythmic movements and acrobatic distorts, Herring figures seem to be moving to the sounds of the music. The movement of his figures are indeed based on genuine poses from break dance. Dance is characterized by wave-like movements, which are transferred from one dancer to the next via the arms, and by head spin or headstands. Occasionally, the action also leads to interactive poses between two dancers, represented by Haring as mutual fusion, between parentheses, page 49. Haring was especially interested in capoeira, a form of Afro-Brazilian martial arts that is performed by at least two participants. He became acquainted with this art form during his frequent visits to Brazil. In his pictures, the focus is on the figures and their movements without any explanatory context, while in still sculptures, the artist succeeds in a highly impressive fashion in giving expression to the particular characteristics of dance. To one such sculpture dating from 1987, Haring gave the explicit title Untitled, Capoeira Dancers, between parentheses left. The scene is determined by two figures who are shown dancing around each other, each seeking to assess the other capabilities, whereby the nimble-footed green figure succeeds in avoiding the attacks of the red antagonist. During a subsequent phase of the dancer, direct bodily contact takes place, and this forms the focus of another sculpture. The title Untitled, head through belly, is here represented quite literally, top left. The pose of the protagonists, who are different physical sizes, demonstrates the attack of the smaller yellow figure whose head is projecting through the belly of the largest partner. The delicate sculpture Julia, by contrast, is inspired by classical dance. It is a portrait of the artist assistant created by Haring in 1987. In a manner uncharacteristic of his sculptures, the head of the dancer, inclined to the other side as well as her legs, are attached from the rest of the body, which is otherwise all in one piece. Also unusual in this sculpture are the additional rings in the abdominal and pelvic region, which suggests a ballerina's tooth. As in his pictures, it takes just few attributes to focus on the particular characteristics of classical dance. Working in three-dimensional was for Haring a further possibility of experimenting with new materials and proving his ability as a sculptor. Once he had taken up sculpture, he gave it equal priority with his paintings. The maquettes created in his studio were executed as large format sculptures in a foundry and then painted in bright, not say garish colors. The first public exhibition of Haring sculptures took place in 1985 at the Leo Castelli Gallery in New York, pages 42-43. Having my sculpture shown at the Castelli Gallery really blows me away because, well, it's like this holy space. I mean, Jones had done a show there. Lichtenstein had done a big mural there. Rosenquist had worked within the space. For me, it was the perfect time to do something totally irreverent. What Haring meant by this was painting the walls of the gallery with the comic figures that he had already drawn as a teenager, thereby rising. Esas fueron dos páginas que dediqué a mi compañero, alumno y mentor, Levi Guadarrama. Sí, ¿no? Entonces tú después. Es como vendrá Cris. Cris vendrá enojado y Cris vendrá molesto. Mira, me estoy quedando dormido. Y tú decides si quieres salir. No. The status of his cartoons to that of his art for the later exhibitions, which opened in 1988 at the gallery Hans Meyer in Dusseldorf. Haring executed large-scale sculptures that were to constitute his largest even project in the field of the visual arts. The sculptures were created in a Dusseldorf foundry on the basis of models and maquettes that Haring had made in New York. Puedes pasar, Chris. Alongside small and medium-sized sculptures, the collection also included gigantic open-air works for the sculpture exhibition in the German city of Munster. Sorry for my German. Even today, 26 years after his death, the steel and aluminum sculpture is still being fabricated as the artist would have wished on the basis of original maquettes and editions. Levi, you are free. No he terminado. ¿Quién entró después? Estas son, no, ya pasamos. Ella. ¿Vas tú?
No,
Estas son también de amor. You are free. Thank you, Levi. Si te quieres quedar, ya pasó Levi, nadie lo vio. Ya pasó. Le vamos a llamar. Es solo la mitad de lo que dedico a... Goodbye, Levi. Thanks for your attention. It was not no, we are reading books all this week and we are only waiting for maybe one Sunday. Hello. 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 Pregúntanos si puedes pasarle.
¿Qué haya hecho?
Yes, for sure, anytime. It was not the art community that helped his work to become enormously popular, but the artist himself. And it was not least for this reason that Haring saw himself confronted with rejections on the part of the established art scene. As an artist, he had simply jumped over the museum and gallery stage and returned directly and publicly to a mass clientele. Haring himself was the medium for the dissemination of his art, which expanded its continuous fashion. As an inventor, campaigner, and manager all in one, Haring enriched the world with another art celebrity, and he was entrepreneurial enough to know how to market himself. He saw the commercialization of his work as an important component of his art, as an update of the 20th century, in reaction to the need for the artistic souvenirs. Without further ado, he declared his art to be a tradable mass commodity. As a result, his iconic language found its way into everyday culture within a very short time. Even as early as 1983, the first unauthorized copies of his works were already beginning to appear in the form of posters and t-shirts. It was a perfect logical consequence when in 1986, Haring opened his first pop shop, between parentheses, opposite, in Manhattan, selling products bearing his own designs and those of a few select artist friends. In this way, he marked his name as an independent label, without thereby diminishing the value of his art. On the contrary, he saw it as an additional form of artistic statement. The goal was to open his art to an even broader public, to make it accessible to all, and to be constantly present in the format of everyday objects without concealing his commercial intention. He had, of course, to face the charge of commercialization made by critics, As his diaries make clear, he was perfectly well aware that the path between art and commerce that he was trading was a narrow one indeed. Between quotation marks, what really fulfills and satisfies me is to make and see things as people react to them. But everything else is difficult. I have tried as best I could to take a new standpoint, a new attitude to selling by painting in full public view and making commercial things which run in the face of an art market which talks of goods. But even these things are co-opted and seen by many as mere advertisements for my sellable artworks. I fear I'll never get out of this trap. However, Herring was not primarily concerned with the commercial aspect, but with satisfying the public even growing need to have share in his art. While traditional American merchandising of works of art is based on existing originals, Herring, by contrast, developed the special motifs of his commercial products. Even today, the Herring's name is guarantee of merchandising success. Whatever he produced was distributed and marked and also imitated worldwide. Where artistic self-marketing was concerned and how to do it, Keith Haring had the example of Andy Warhol before his eyes. After Warhol's factory, the establishment of the pop shop represented a further invention and brilliant invention, all that on the part of an artist who knew how to recognize my bad and exploit the reproducibility of his own art. Haring did not want to be exclusively represented by galleries. He also wanted to act as his own dealer, not least in order to maintain his own integrity as an artist and to retain his street credibility. The fundamental difference between these two artists in this respect, and one which shows up in their very different personalities and attitudes to life, consists in the fact that Herring had a very limited interest in making money with the pop shop. He donated the majority of his profits to charitable causes. The first meeting between Herring and Warhol took place in 1983 on the occasion of the opening of an exhibition of works by Herring and LA2. Estas son las palabras, estamos leyendo nuestros libros que nos trajeron los reyes, este lo trajeron a mí, y Herring, y esto fue lo que dejé a nuestro compañero. So después de Tristan. Adrian. Tom Gallery in New York City. Andy Warhol was already a member of the New York Society elite. And functioned as a kind of seismograph for the social scene. What interested him would automatically become the object of general interest. A genuine friendship grew between Herring and Warhol, a friendship characterized by mutual recognition, respect, for sure, respect and artistic interaction. These range from visits to each other's studios to joint projects. Still a young artist himself, Herring benefited from the experience and contacts of someone like Andy Warhol. Conversely, Herring provided Warhol with access to the younger artists on the alternative scene, which in turn Warhol exploited as a source of inspiration. The figure of Andy Warhol turns up a number of times in Herring's work. For his friend, he created the figure of Andy Mouse, based on Mickey Mouse, which dressed up in sunglasses and wig, clearly sports the well-known features of Andy Warhol. Duplicated many times, this figure turns up in a larger scale work dating from 1985, pages 52 and 53. Herring saw his friend as the American icon, literally born off the hands of the original Mickey Mouse figures and cheered by the broad messages. The background in red, white, and blue is reminiscent of the Stars and Stripes. A drawing dating from the same year, page 53, shows similarities to this homage. The motif of Andy Mouse is supplemented by dollar signs in the ears of the mouse. The halo of rage surrounding the figure is unusually jagged. By combining the Walt Disney product with the Andy Warhol products, Herring accords his friends the same iconic status, fame, and glory are accompanied by the demonstrative marketing of art characteristics of Warhol. It was through Andy Warhol that Herring made the acquaintance of Grace Jones, whom he managed to engage as a model for a body painting. Kit Haring, who had already painted the body of the African American dancer Bill T. Jones, saw the singer body the perfect combination of primitive and pop. Especially for this event, David Spada, a jewelry designer friend of Haring's, created a skirt and crown that were likewise painted with Haring's motifs. The photographer Robert Mapplethorpe immortalized his unusual collaboration, page 55. On February 22, 1987, Andy Warhol died unexpectedly following an operation. Haring, who was on a visit to Brazil at the time, learned of his friend's death over the telephone. In his diary, he wrote, Andy's life and works made my work possible in the first place. Andy created the precedent for the possibility of my kind of art. He was the first truly public artist in a comprehensive sense, and his art and his life have changed our ideas of art and life in the 20th century. He was the first truly modern artist, and it was probably the only real pop artist. Just a few days before the death of his friend, he made a drawing that cast Warhol in a very humorous light. Opposite, the oversized head of the artist is sitting on a recommended nude woman's body. In the foreground is a bright yellow banana, whose interpretation as a phallic symbol seems ambiguous. Unambiguous. The role reversal and the sexual connotation give the drawing a homoerotic aspect. The loss of his friend was a great blow to Harry. The fact is that artistically, he owes a great deal to Andy Warhol. Bless you. However, it would be wrong to describe Herring merely as his epigone. Herring himself pointed to one essential difference in an interview with Germano Salant. My drawings don't try to imitate life. They try to create life, to invent life. It was his claim. This is what I dedicated to Tristan. Tristan, you are free. Goodbye. Who's next? Who entered the? These are the words that I dedicate to my friend fellowship, Mr. Adrian. Of wanting to create life that distance carrying from the goals of pop art and indeed from Andy Warhol. While pop art drews its themes from pre-existing printed originals, appropriating commercially familiar motifs, the foundation of Herring's work was an impetus that sprang from inside of him. Although Herring cannot be seen as children's painter, he was a tireless advocate of children's causes. In the 1980s, public art was strongly promoted, providing an environment in which Herring's art and his commitment to children could be effectively combined. public commission and sponsorship, public commission and sponsoring measures for projects with children was supplemented by paintings and sculptures with children-related themes. Having enjoyed contact with children and not infrequently preferred their company to that of adults. In those pictures painted expressly for children, he returned to the comic style of his youth. Page 47 bottom. His commitment to children's causes was multifaceted. He gave drawing workshops in schools and museums in New York, Amsterdam, London, Tokyo, and Bordeaux, and designed motifs for literacy campaigns in Germany and the United States. Many of his public murals were created for and in collaboration with children. In 1986, on the occasion of the celebrations marking the centenary of the Statue of Liberty in New York, Herring painted an enormous portrait with the outlines of the statue, which was subsequently painted in by thousands of children left. The banner, which hung across the front of the building, covered more than 10 stories. The following year, Herring designed and painted murals and carousel for the Luna traveling amusement park in Hamburg, Germany, as he was regularly surrounded by children and young people whenever he worked in public. He always had plenty of stickers, buttons, and coloring books with him, which he would distribute free of charge to his young fans. Nadie lee traduce. Lucero, you are free. Ese sí le entendió, creo que es el primero que entiende la carrera. Eres muy popular, Lucero, no te aplaudieron. Bueno, voy a la mitad de lo de Ariel. Sex and crime. Behind the likeness of the picture lurks danger that Herring's work. ¿Es que notaron? Me dice que no entiende nada, pero Lucero, you're free. Ese ya lo aprendió. Sex and crime. Behind the likeness of the picture lurks danger that Herring's work will be primarily associated with jolly, cheerfully, and optimistic themes. However, his themes are anything but jolly, cheerfully, and optimistic. Quite the contrary. The untroubled freedom from care and demonstrative joyfulness are often coupled with brutal reality. A not insignificant proportion of his paintings is concerned with violence and threats, death, and sexual oppression. Only on closer inspection does darker aspect reveal itself, the metamorphosis both in the bodily and the sexual scene. All of which lend the paintings a frightening and violent note. What is special about this ambiguity and typical of Herring's art in this respect is that his imaginary is not any way complicated by this aspect of its content. The large former painting and title, dating from 1985, pages 58 to 59, demonstrates a veritable purgatory of sexual desire. Reduced entirely to the colors, blacks and red scenario, is revealed against background and placing flames, the whole thing reminiscent of medieval concepts of hell. We are reading this in a live transmission. So if you're in a live broadcast, if you're accompanied with minors, we advise you discretion. We see compressed into a... Oh, se rió, Chris!